Police found the suitcases after they found the body. That is what makes the Isdal Woman case feel wrong immediately. By the time investigators opened the luggage linked to the dead woman in Isdalen, outside Bergen, they were not discovering a life. They were discovering how carefully someone had tried to erase one. Labels had been cut out. Names were false. Witnesses described a woman who seemed to change how she appeared. Coded notes suggested movement, but not motive. The clues did not point cleanly toward a person. They pointed toward deliberate subtraction. The body had been found in November 1970 in Isdalen, a steep valley near Bergen. The woman had been badly burned. Investigators concluded that she had taken a large number of sleeping pills and died in the fire. Officially, the case was treated as suicide. But even if that explains the final mechanism of death, it does not explain the life that led there. And that is why the case survived. Before the valley, there were hotel registers, false names, cash payments, and sightings that never quite settled into one stable identity. Witnesses remembered a woman who seemed self-contained and alert. Some said she spoke multiple languages. Some noticed changes in clothing or presentation that made her seem slightly different from one place to the next. Nobody held on to a complete version of her for long. That detail matters. Witnesses did not describe chaos. They described control. A woman who seemed composed. Sometimes elegant. Sometimes watchful. Someone who looked as if she was trying to remain ordinary while also preventing anyone from forming a complete picture. Police eventually connected her to 2 suitcases left in a station locker in Bergen. That is the real center of the mystery. Inside were wigs, glasses, cosmetics, and clothing with identifying marks removed. There were also coded notes later linked to dates and travel movements. None of this looked theatrical. That almost makes it stranger. The code did not feel like a dramatic cipher. The missing labels did not feel symbolic. The whole pattern felt practical, as if the woman understood how ordinary life leaks information and worked steadily against it. There is something especially unsettling about how unromantic those clues are. Instead of a dramatic confession, investigators found the administrative edges of a life. Luggage, registers, labels, cosmetics, roots. The evidence does not suggest glamour so much as maintenance. Someone was actively managing how she would appear and how much of herself strangers would be able to recover. Even the coded notes point in that direction. They seem to help reconstruct where she traveled and when. But they still do not explain why she traveled that way or who she thought might be following the trail she left behind. That is the constant frustration of the case. The clues often answer one small question while opening a larger one. That is what gives the case its peculiar force. Many mysteries survive because the evidence is chaotic. The Isdal Woman survives because the evidence feels organized. And that is also why later retellings drifted so easily toward espionage. A dead unidentified woman in Cold War Europe, traveling alone under aliases, changing appearance, removing labels, and dying in a remote valley sounds like a spy story before anyone adds one. But the honest version is narrower and more frustrating. The evidence suggests secrecy. It does not prove its purpose. Was she involved in intelligence work? Was she hiding from someone? Was she trying to detach herself from an earlier life for reasons that had nothing to do with the Cold War fantasies later attached to the case? The record never closes those questions. What it does show is a person repeatedly resisting identification in small, practical ways. That matters more than the glamorous version of the mystery. Removed labels are not cinematic, but they are revealing. So are the false names, the coded travel notes, the cash payments, and the shifting outward presentation. Together, they suggest someone who did not merely vanish after death. She was already trying to become hard to trace while still alive. That is why the official ruling continues to feel incomplete to so many people. Even if the final act was self-destruction, suicide does not automatically explain the long preparation that seems to have come before it. A cause of death is not the same thing as an explanation of identity. And that is the difference between closure and resolution. Administratively, a case can be filed once a probable mechanism of death has been described. Historically and emotionally, it remains open if the person at its center never fully returns into view. Modern attention has sharpened parts of the outline. Later forensic work has narrowed some possibilities about where she may have come from. That is valuable. But narrowing is not naming. But an outline is not a name. And a name is not the same thing as a verifiable life story. So the Isdal woman remains suspended in an uncomfortable middle state. Not empty. Not solved. Rich in clues. Poor in certainty. That is why the case still lingers. Not because there was no evidence, but because the evidence looked like a person deliberately stepping backward out of the record. By the time police opened the suitcases in Bergen, they were already late. The woman they were trying to identify had spent too long preparing not to be found.